Hi, I'm Peter Reinhardt, and welcome to the Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread. I'm coming to you from the Hance Auditorium in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we've held the last 4 bread symposiums, and as you can see, there's nobody here but me. And this is where we usually have it. The seats are all empty because this year, thanks to you, the symposium will be presented online, virtually, in our new presentation hall, which is where I will join you in just a minute. Thank you, and thanks for being part of our new virtual Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread, presented by Puratos. Welcome again. Throughout the entire symposium, I'll be thanking our generous sponsors over and over again, and ask that you do as well by visiting their booths and pavilions in the exhibitor hall. There you will see lots of bonus content, and you can also make appointments to meet with the folks from these companies that serve our baking community so well. Our presenting sponsor is Puratos, who has partnered with us from the very beginning for all of our symposiums, and it is their support that helped us get this one-of-a-kind gathering of thought leaders off the ground. Please also visit our fabulous flour and milling sponsors, Ardent Mills, Lindley Mills, and Central Milling. Thank you also to our equipment sponsors, the WP Bakery Group and Allied Bakery and Food Service Equipment. And thank you also to our specialty food product companies, Probiotin, Fire Within, Big Green Egg, and Mock Mill. Please check out all of their booths to learn about their wonderful and unique products. And also thanks to our media sponsors, Cook's Country, The Local Palate, the James Beard Foundation, and the Bread Bakers Guild of America. You'll be hearing more about all of them throughout the entire series of presentations. So again, thank you to all our sponsors. At the end of today's presentation, you will also see our credit scroll, thanking all of the people behind the scenes who made this event possible, including our production and technical partner, Ganoid Communications, our creative team at Gumbo Marketing, and the many folks at Johnson & Wales University, our hosts for this, our 4th annual gathering. So stick around, if you will. But now, it's time to get things rolling with today's presentation, so let's go live. And once again, welcome to the Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread, presented by Puratos. And we are live, and welcome back, everybody. Just wanted to let you know that I'm in my end of summer clothes, my new Johnson & Wales shirt, and because today was the first day of classes at Johnson & Wales, the students are back and we're up and running, and I was able to break away because I'm here for the symposium. And today's very exciting presentation, and I don't want to spend too much time leading up to it. I want to get through all our preliminaries because we've got Guy Frenkel here, who's got a tremendous presentation that I think you're going to love. But before we do, our announcements as usual. First of all, today we're going to spin the wheel, and we've got a prize. We've still got the another knife to give away. This one is the 9-inch. This is more like the sword knife that that we gave away the first week. 9-inch Henkel's serrated bread knife, and we're going to spin that wheel in just a second. Let me tell you what's coming up next week and the rest of this week. So, of course, Guy will be back on Wednesday for part 2 of this presentation, where he's actually going to be doing some demonstrations on creative stenciling and shaping. So today's presentation kind of leads into that. But next week,
Peter, it's on Wednesday. I thought it was tomorrow. Not joking this time.
No, it is Wednesday.
All right, cool. It's fine. But
yeah, it's Wednesday at the same time on Wednesday. On next week, and thanks for bringing that up, because just so you all know, and most of the regulars know that it's Monday, Wednesday are our presentations. Next week, we have on Monday, Eric Pallant, who is a writer and author and sourdough maven on his new book that just came out called Sourdough Culture. And this book chronicles the journey of one particular sourdough, kind of its own sort of lineage. And in following that lineage, he really kind of unpeels back the layers of sourdough in general, perhaps some of the myths, some of the misconceptions about sourdough, and all the things that he learned, as he went on his own personal journey and quest to understand this living sourdough culture that he's been entrusted with from generation after generation. And then on next Wednesday, Michael Gleason and Daniel Kurzrock are going to be here to talk about, the topic that they're going to be presenting is called Grains, Good for You and Good for the Planet. Now, Daniel is one of the partners in Regrained, a company that specializes in upcycling, utilizing, for instance, the spent grain from the beer industry and turning it into ingredients that can be put back into bread so that nothing goes to waste. And of course, Michael Gleason is with our sponsor, Puratos, and he heads up the innovation work within the company. And so together they're going to present an overview of the value of the diversity of grains for well-being, as well as new ways to use grain so that we get maximum benefits from them. So that's next week. So that's a full week next week. And of course, we go on and on after that. But let's take care of the most important thing for this moment, which is spin the wheel. So I'm going to ask Gurman if you would go ahead and put that wheel up. There it is. And all the names that are on there are people that have signed up in all the booths. And we're going to do this one more time. We have one more giveaway next month that we'll do. But today we've got this knife to give. We've got names on there. And go ahead and Gurman, give it a spin. We've taken off the names of the people who have already won knives. So these are the folks that have gone to all of the booths and signed the guest booth. And for those of you who would like to be on this wheel next time, go to those booths and sign all the guest books so that you're eligible. And it's about to stop, and it is, looks like it's still going. Is it going? There it is. Greg Tarbuden. Greg Tarbuden, we're going to have to track you down. You are the winner of this knife. Greg, if you would do me a favor, if you're watching or when you find out, shoot me an email at peter.reinhardt@jwu.edu or through the symposium, or just write to me at breadsymposium.com or Peter at bread. No, what do we have? Our symposium email is symposium@jwu.edu. Just write to me one way or the other. Let me know. I'll track you down from our end, and we'll make a connection, get the address, and I will ship this beautiful knife, which is a gift from Zwilling and Henkel's Fine Cutlery. That will be going your way. So with that taken care of, we've got a new winner, and all of our old business is taken care of. So I'm going to turn over this session to Guy Frenkel, aka CR. And Guy, why don't you come on in and tell us what you're going to do. I know our topic today is bread couture. And so I'm going to let you, so I've explained it over the last couple of weeks, but probably only inadequately. I want to let you describe it in your own words and what this topic means to you, and take us through, I think you've got like 50 some slides to show us some great photos. So the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you, Peter. So yeah, should I start by also sharing the screen immediately?
It's up to you, but I'll mention to viewers that if you have any questions along the way, go ahead and use the Q&A or the chat, and I will monitor that, and I'll throw in questions as they're pertinent to the presentation. I don't want Guy to lose his flow on this thing because there's a lot to cover. But if it's something that needs to kind of be interjected, I'll do that on his behalf. And then Guy, I think, yeah, you've got the screen up there. You got the beginning of the slides. So if that photo doesn't get your attention already, folks, I don't know what will, because that's some beautiful loaf. Guy, it's all yours.
One last question, Peter. Should I mute my video? Because who cares about my face, and we can focus on the images better?
That's up to you. It's just if you want
to.
Tell
me if it makes a difference in your. I don't see a mouse here, but wait.
You can mute your video if you want. and then you'll go away, and then yeah, and I'm going to do the same.
And I'm still sharing the screen. Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Play. Boom.
Here it is, full screen now.
So it's just this in my voice?
Yep.
Okay, I preed it up for no reason. All right, so yeah, bread couture, what is it? I've been writing and talking about it since 2016, it seems, in a first article that came out in Breadlines and the Bread Bakers Guild. And it's been evolving. My thoughts on it has been evolving, but the basic premise was bread is known as the humblest of food. And what if instead we celebrated it with no limitation? What would that look like if we moved away from humble and into luxury and put in, time and expensive ingredients and knowledge and effort and celebrate bread to the top of its potential and go on that kind of exploration. And today I would like to start with a pitch on why it's more relevant than ever. So let's see what's going on here. I see.
There you go.
Yeah, I wasn't sure which button. Boomer. Okay, these are my sponsors. I think we share, well, my friends, we share at least a couple of them.
Definitely. The Annex and Mockmill are supporting this whole symposium as well as your presentation today, along with your other personal sponsors.
Yeah, and the Sourdough Library, that was fun.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, part of Puratos, yeah.
Yeah, they're part of Puratos. All right, so let's start where bread came from, right? I'm not suggesting that this is where we're at. There's been so much growth, but traditionally, if you look at this slide, you will find what I call the usual suspects. And when you go to baking school, you better come out knowing how to make a good baguette and a good country loaf and a good whole wheat loaf and a rye loaf and maybe cranberry walnuts and right, like an array of maybe 20 products, croissant. And bakers are sent off into the world to replicate those products for their entirety of their career. And the skill comes from being able to deal with changing conditions of weather, and the wheat will come in differently, and yet a really good artisan baker will manage to get you a beautiful baguette come winter or summer, hard wheat or soft, right? And there's an amazing skill, and I don't suggest we should skip over that, right? I suggest that we should learn everything that traditional baking has to offer and has to teach. But my premise is that it's no longer in today's world going to be enough. And the reason is that the robots are coming, right? And so if our skill as artisan bakers is to control the different environments and be able to replicate a high-end or a high-quality product, these robots are going to have a controlled environment and controlled ingredients and skill that is better than ours, right, in many ways. So here's a little example of a fresh baked loaf that you can watch being baked as you shop and pick it up, hot on your way out of the supermarket. That's probably going to be ubiquitous soon. And here is a robot that is equipped with a 3D system that reads those baguettes, makes a virtual map of them, and they score the 5 scores better than me or you every single day, 24 hours a day, without 10-minute breaks or lunch. So these guys are coming, and they're going to do an amazing job making these traditional bread. And yet, what we can do that they do not have is human creativity. And that's where bread couture becomes, there's actually, a need for it rather than just a thought exercise. Perhaps when I started, I was like, let's see what happens. But now I recognize that this is something that should be embraced by all individual, small artisan and medium-sized bakers, right? I think the differentiation is in the human creativity. And it's across industries, not just when it comes to baking. But let's explore what it will look like for us. So the first thing I would like to encourage, and I've been encouraging bakers to do, is move beyond wheat. Right now, wheat, we talk about white flour, and most bakers, right? Maybe not you guys that are here already, probably far advanced from this kind of conversation. But if you go to most bakeries, you will hear white flour and whole wheat flour. And a baker asked me today, what do they mean by 50% whole grain? They want, I don't know what that means, right? But it's not just about sifted wheat and wheat. It's not just about red wheat and white wheat, right? It's as if winemakers would talk about their grapes in terms of red grapes and green grapes. And which grape are you using for this wine of yours? Oh, it's a red one. No, right? There's a level of nuance and variations and varieties in the grapes. The same exists within wheat, right? We know the names of wheat varieties that we like better than other wheat varieties, and we ask the farmers for them by name. And, you know, just to name a few off the top of my head, Yacora Rojo, or Sonora, or Turkey Red, or Mars de Blanc. There, you know, there's lists of beautiful heritage just within wheat varieties that we should know. And appreciate and get intimate with, right, and utilize. Some are better for pastries, others are better for country loaves, Rue de Bordeaux, Red Fife. It's endless and it's beautiful, and you guys should immerse yourself in that knowledge and practice. Beyond wheat, this is just quick pictures. They're not well edited. I just took them like an hour ago at the pantry. So here we have blue tinge Ethiopian Pharaoh from top left, clockwise, I guess, and Durum next to it, and Emmer and Spelt, and I'm getting the name, I'm mixing the names up. And what else do we have here? Triticale, you know, so all of these amazing cousins of wheats or types of ancient wheats are just waiting to be explored, utilized, and featured and celebrated in your products. But even within, so here, if you look at the top row, these are 3 different types of barley, right? So even when we say barley, there's blue barley, there's purple barley, and there's black barley on top of your many varieties of tan barleys. And they have different flavor profiles. And of course, visually, they're stunningly different. And on the bottom, I have the 3 different types of rye. And when you mill them, one of them will smell like chocolate chip cookie and another will smell like cinnamon. The third one is actually a wild grass rye variety that we found is edible, even though not yet allowed, right? Not recognized as human food, but exploring that. So the varieties are endless, and there's a story to be told through them, especially if you work with your local farmers and embrace local varieties that are grown locally to you. So that's the first part, is the flour, right? And the way you utilize it, because of course, Ardent and even Central Milling don't yet mill, you know, all of these, some of them, right? They're making great strides with Ardent, and Central Milling is the annex for the Ardent is what I wanted to say. And then you can mill them yourself on a very small scale. If you're a home baker, if you have a small neighborhood bakery, I have 3 of these mock mills set up, falling into a sifter through a hole in a table, and it makes fast jobs of a few kilos of flour that I use for pre-ferments. And New American Mills on the right, not my sponsors, but awesome product. If you're a larger scale production, you can totally make your own unique flours, not just, you know, white flour, but really unique and flavorful and aromatic flours. If you don't want a mill or don't have a mill, you can sprout them. They make beautiful, tasty addition as wet sprouted grains. I soak them in alcohols like whiskey or ouzo, and flambe them. On the left, you can see an example of that to retain all of the alcoholic flavor, but without the liquid, and make additions out of that. It's endless. Here, You see examples of 6 butter cookies that are featuring different grains, einkorn, rye, emmer, and so forth, and 6 different matzah bread. I'm Jewish, so on Passover I made matzah from 6 varieties of ancient grains. We talked, Peter, you talked about the spent grains in the introductory or in the pre-introductory, but here is a product of collaboration between a farmer that grew emmer and a brewer that brewed wild emmer beer. And then I used the wild beer also as a fermentation and as the hydration, and the spent grains and also the emmer flour to make this loaf that we baked in a cloche that was made from the clay where the emmer was grown. And we did that in a museum, but we really wanted to celebrate and feature the emmer in this project. And you can do something less extravagant, but still celebrate emmer in a unique way, right? Or other forms of grains that maybe a brewer is using, and then you can feature in your breads and so forth. Moving on, and Peter, feel free to stop me. I see that already there's one Q&A in the chat, but I can't click through. So if something is relevant, please do.
Well, I think there's just one comment coming in about how brewers have been designing beers around these varietal grains also for quite a while.
So exactly. So if you can find those brewers and then play with that, right? And that's exactly what I did on this last slide. This Craftsman Brewing is an artisan brewer from Pasadena. He's genius. And so, yeah, he was the only one that could malt the emmer himself for us and go through the small scale production for this, like little experiment of the heart or project of. But yes, there's definitely brewers are also now starting to play with these grains, as should we. All right, moving beyond commercial yeast, I feel strongly about it. I eat all sorts of fermented bread with commercial yeast everywhere, of course. But when it comes to my baking, I think that it's a strong statement. It's just better on all the ways that you understand why natural fermentation. I don't need to explain the virtue of it, but rather what I would do today is assure you that you're giving up nothing if you make this transition. So we think of a sourdough starter as a sourdough starter as a sourdough starter as a sourdough starter. I'm misquoting Chad Robertson in one of his videos, but that's not true, right? Sourdoughs or natural pre-ferments can take many forms and have many different qualities to them. And there's many different traditions. If you came in early, you saw Carl visiting Japan and with a sourdough made from rice and goji and some other ingredients. And I can assure you it will leaven your bread differently than the sourdough you have in your pantry right now. These are some of my sourdoughs fed with fruits and vegetables, and they train, the yeast in different ways. These are the fruit and flour yeast waters where basically I collect yeast and bacteria off of organic produce, and I inoculate water. If it doesn't have sugar in the fruit itself, I add sugar to feed it, and it grows inside liquid, and then I use that to build a starter, and it's extremely favors the yeast compared to the lactose bacteria, even though both exist in there. So it's a good way if you want to make sweeter products with less sour notes. It's a beautiful way to naturally ferment your products. And here are some examples of the results. A croissant, naturally leavened. It's not a hybrid croissant. There is no little bit of yeast in this, nor in that baguette, nor in that country loaf. So with enough, practice and study, you can absolutely replicate and surpass, in my opinion, the results of commercial yeast. And even when it comes to schedule, right? One of my pan loaves is 4 hours from mix to oven, and it's naturally leavened. And it's not because I'm in a rush. It's just The process is beautiful and makes a beautiful product. So that's what I have to say about natural fermentation. Next, culinary. So if before I talked about the quote unquote 20 traditional products that are taught, imagine that if you went to culinary school and you were sent into the world, with the purpose of now making the traditional schnitzel, the traditional meatloaf, the traditional gnocchi, and whatever other 20 dishes they taught you, right? But no, we should start thinking like chefs and creating our own, creations. So we use that by embracing every ingredient that is edible. So here I have purple sweet potatoes that I roast and then I mash and I dehydrate and I mill into a flour. You can see it on the right coming in strong purple. And it's the most delicious and beautiful addition to a flour arrangement, pun intended. Maybe at 20% with white flour or wheat flour. It's strikingly in its color and in its taste. Here, I'll let play is ingredients that I add 2 grains when I mill them. There's some tangerine peel and rose hips and marshmallow root, and probably a couple of other ingredients that I can't see right now. Oh, I'm happy it's muted. It was loud before. So one way to incorporate all of that goodness is just milling it, right? Running it. And I talked about this contraption hole in the table, so you can see that in operation. And it sifts into a bucket. And look at that gorgeous tangerine peel, rose hip flour. Here, it's a Valentine loaf, and I used rose petal, jasmine blossoms, and elderberry blossoms. That's loud. Other ways of culinary on the right, there's mashed sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes, if you know them by that name, with sprouted, and you can see the little sprouted onion seeds. And a bunch of other black garlic in there, and a bunch of other culinary ingredients. And on the left, this will become one baguette-like dough, but the wrapper dough on the outside is beetroot, and then it's like a basil juice dough with pine nuts. So I kind of deconstructed pesto and made a beet pesto loaves. And you make little slices of baguette and toast them. And here are other examples. There's pomegranate raisins, and there's some black squid with polenta, and pistachio with the purple corn. It's endless, right? So when you start thinking in these terms, you can deconstruct existing dishes, culinary dishes. You can come up with your own combinations of what you might think is delicious. And then here are some of the tools, and I emphasize some of the tools that you should start using, right? It's not just about a mixer and a table, but the mill, the frying pan. Here you can see me flambeing whiskey out of the grains while retaining all of they've been in the whiskey for a month and they've infused, and then I flambe the whiskey out, and then I just add that whole, and once it's cold, of course. And the juicer is one of my favorite cold pressed juicers. I use it for the many, like carrots, I will juice and use as hydration. Many of my additions, I use this juicer. And the dehydrator, I have pomegranate raisins, but that's not a product that you can buy, right? But you can make. And sweet potato, purple sweet potato that was mashed, ran through a dehydrator, and the tangerine peels, right? Many of the pantry runs through the dehydrator before I can store it and use it. So whatever a chef might use, a smoker is a tool I haven't used yet, but is a good example. All right, moving on. Medicinal. So this is for me, the new frontier of exploration. I realized that it's not just culinary, but many of these products have medicinal use, and that of course, I can be accidental and random and ignorant about it, or I can delve into the study and understand some of the wisdom behind it, and then be more purposeful and more precise, right? So as we know, you can see on the top, there's, and on the top in the top right is a display of different Chinese medicinal mushrooms. There's different ways to use them. Some of them you brew into tea, and others I can mill. And there's different, quantities in which you want to be consuming them, but I work those into the breads. And then on the bottom, there's other Chinese or European herbal medicine ingredients, echinacea. It's good for the immune system. There's here's other photos of them. Here's an example of how I might incorporate it. There's different ways, but this is just one way of rough milling all of the medicinal stuff and maybe soaking it and then incorporating it as a swirl. You can mill it with the grains into the flour. And the idea behind it is that you can make a bread that is anti-inflammatory, or bread that is low glycemic index, or bread, so for specific people, right? Broad, I'm not talking about like a Chinese medicine that is a one-on-one, but there's categories of it, whatever it's called. It's not illnesses, but conditions where people might appreciate these kind of products. And you can base, here's a couple of books. I have many more, but this is a good start of knowing what's what and what you're doing when you're using them. So I don't have too much to say, specific stuff to say about that yet, but you understand and can do your own research when it comes to medicinal ingredients. Of course, don't claim that you're a doctor or that your bread is medicine. That would be wrong and false. All right, moving on to aesthetics. I think in the class tomorrow, we'll focus on the aesthetics of the bread, not the other parts of the conversation. But one way of elevating bread from its humble, humble part of the meal, or the canvas on which other, paintings are drawn, is by making the bread itself beautiful. So this is a display I did for HBO for the Game of Thrones. And so one element and one way to do that, that's the most simple and utilizing a baker's tool and skill, is scoring, and using scoring in a slightly more creative than a utility way. Of course, when I started with these slides, let's see, we've advanced so much since these early slides, and there's some amazing scoring masters out there that are far better at it than me, but I can still make the point. You can see the sunflower score that became very popular a few years ago, and there's a heart score for Valentine, and even though it tore, I found it symbolic and beautiful, and that was my favorite loaf. And there's many other examples that you can see on Instagram, so I didn't bother too much. Stencils, we'll do a lot of these tomorrow. Symbolic, so these are just like, I use symbols, appropriate symbols from, if you will, it's 2021, from other cultures, or celebrate other cultures. And these don't mean too much necessarily. Some of them are more representative for an Oscar party or for Valentine's Day. That jasmine and rose blend that I showed you earlier went into the loaf on the right. And a collaboration I did celebrating Jane Goodall on the left, the gorilla lady. So there was a stencil celebrating her. Another way to use the stencils is to represent the featured ingredient. So black squid ink loaf has a squid on it, and this loaf was made from heirloom tomatoes that I blended and used and strained and used as hydration. So there's a tomato on it, and the medicinal Chinese mushroom umami loaf has a mushroom on it. It's not psychedelic. And then just pretty fashion inspired patterns, that add the couture element, very easy. And we'll go over it tomorrow. If you can go political, if you're so inclined, I often am. and celebrate diversity or people or causes. And moving on. Taste the rainbow. So one of my favorite things to do, it's a wow element when people slice into the loaf, is to shock them with color. And especially since bread is usually brown on the outside anyway, once it's done baking, it's a little bit like genode or whatever the stones are called that you break. And there's that element of, oh my God, I didn't expect this. This baguette was my thesis work in 2016 when I figured out how to make each of the different colors. I was very proud of that and did a fried baguette for a fundraiser. So here are some of the doughs that I use. And like here on the right, it's carrot juice. On the left, it's turmeric and squid ink. It's 2 doughs. Here are some baked example of purple corn, and I'm not sure what the green was in this case. I have many different greens. And then on the right is butterfly pea blossom. Here are other examples. So all of these colors come from natural ingredients, and these ingredients add flavor. They add other qualities. The corn has, starch in it that makes a very, if you can see on the top left, you see the shine that comes from the corn. Here's some more examples. So that's the juicer, the dehydrator. There's different ways of incorporating those colors into your loaves. And then, of course, be creative, right? So what I show you is not, of course, you can replicate, but the idea is go and make your own again, right? It's not about replicating, but it's about being inspired and then, making your own little creations. So here are some of mine. We'll be doing the one on the left tomorrow. So if you do want to replicate, you can, or at least learn the principles, because I basically did this square one after learning a different one. I'll show you the original one and the technique I've learned, and then how I applied it to this, and you'll understand the whole process of embracing tradition, but then building on it, right? And making your own addition to it. Here I have bread that self-sustains itself. Peter, are you unmuted?
I just unmuted because I'm just blown away by these. I just want to mention those who are watching live. When Guy says tomorrow, he means Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday. I'm so sorry. I really
okay. I just want to clarify it, so it'll be Wednesday. For those who are watching it on the archived, recorded version, you'll be able to
immediately
just right after the other. You can get a double whammy once both of them are recorded to the archives. But and then a couple quick comments. Someone said the more beautiful they are, the harder they are to cut. And that's not really a question. It was like, but it seems like that's one of the questions is do they become more difficult to cut when they're that beautiful, especially those geodes?
That's a good question. So when I think of these breads, these celebratory breads, it doesn't look like the daily bread that mom takes to make sandwiches for the kids for school. Of course not, right? These are occasional breads. But what I mean by that is when you're invited, I'm in Los Angeles. So in Hollywood, when you're invited to a dinner party, and it's the same everywhere, I'm sure, at least in America, you come with a bottle of wine, right? That's like the expected thing. And usually those bottles of wine here, at least, are maybe $30 or $40 or $50 kind of a bottle of wine, right? People don't want you to bring the cheap wine here. But when you do bring that bottle of wine, what you end up doing with it is placing it next to the other bottles of wine on the table set for that. You don't even present it to the host as a gift, right? Unless it's a $200 bottle of wine and you have a story about how you brought it back from Paris, it's just like a ritual, that kind of a mandatory ticket almost, right? Like at a Subway. But if you bring a $50 bread, like a geode bread like this, and it has a stencil, and first of all, it's already, let me turn my camera on, and also I'll show you one of the ways in which we wrap it. So, see this, guys? Comes like this with a little Seor tag, right? And it feels Doesn't feel like bread that you picked up at the grocery store or the baker. And you present that, or sometimes it comes in a box with a little addition to it. Let me turn my video off and go back to the presentation. I'm still sharing the screen, so play. Is this right? Are we good? Peter?
I just had to unmute. Yeah, it looks like we're still good.
Okay, cool. So what I get reported back when I'm not there to see it is that it's a joyful occasion, right? Like the person that brought the bread says, "Oh, guys, you got to see this bread." It's still a new thing, right? So there's still a novelty to it, but they cut it, and that geode is like a fun. And we talk a lot about breaking bread and the symbolism of that. So no, what happens is it becomes people become a little bit childlike, right? And you can see that it's not a cheap artificial food coloring rainbow kind of for kids, right? It feels like it's for adults, and the taste is especially since it's naturally fermented and there's culinary thought that went into it, is the whole experience is just extremely rewarding, right? There is no sense of it's too, people say that on Instagram or on Facebook, oh, it's too pretty to slice, but that's never the case. People are always extremely happy to slice and then devour. And I've had an exhibit in an art gallery, and at the end of the night, the breads was on the walls and on pedestals all night. And as the night was getting later, one by one, I sliced all of them and we ate them, because they're not, at the end of the day, they're not pieces of art, right? They're edible art, and the eating and the sharing of it is part of the intent when I make them.
It makes it more immersive. It's an immersive piece of
An
art.
immersive piece of art, that's right. And so it all, yeah, it's a complimentary question, but no, the answer is no. There is no mourning in cutting into it. There's just more joy. So yeah, this standing one and this sunshine one and fire one. And this is the last slide. This is something I'm really excited about. It's culinary and it's beautiful. And it's, so I basically put a small amount of brioche dough. In this case, it's a bicolor pumpkin, black squid dough in a pumpkin or a pepper, right? Other vessel-like vegetables. And then I proof it until it reaches the top, and then I bake it. And at the same time that the brioche bakes, it's a mini pumpkin just for scale. These are one of the ones you can hold in your hand, not like a giant Halloween pumpkin, but the little tiny ones. Or imagine a bell pepper as another, and then.
So you're basically roasting the vegetable, and at the same time you're baking the bread.
That's right. And it's just in it with the juices, already sucking up all of the juices from the roast. And and in my case here, because it was a mini pumpkin, I added pumpkin seeds, but of course not the ones from this mini pumpkin, but ones from the store,
Right.
Yeah, I added them back. So I don't know how long that was, but that was the presentation. Was I really quick?
Amazing. You got it in like just a little over half an hour, which I'm blown away. But keep them up there so that because we may want to go back.
I'm going back, and then if you want to spend more time on questions.
Yeah, I think some questions start to come in. And folks, go ahead. This is your chance now to fire away or make comments. We've got about 15 minutes before we run out of time. So I just want to say, first of all, that those black breads are really spectacular. And the thought that came to me as I was watching it is how much this presentation is really about imagination. And what you've been doing with bread is really about showing what is possible when you just let your imagination run wild and apply it to a craft, such as bread baking, to create things that have never been seen before.
Thank you, Peter.
So that idea of a thought exercise, you were saying it's not just a thought exercise, but it's an actual real life manifestation, taking the thought exercise, into reality. Is there a process you go through, Guy, to release your imagination that way, to let yourself kind of be
first
constriction?
I want to really emphasize that it's not a an esoteric case study and like a thought exercise and look at that, how cool, carry on as usual, but rather it's an invitation to participate, right? To all bakers. And it doesn't have to be abandon everything you're doing and start doing this. And I say start small, don't commit, but make one couture loaf on the weekend, triple the price of the most expensive loaf because it's going to take more work and the ingredients will be more expensive. You know, make it as expensive as it needs to be so you don't feel stingy, but you feel like you want to spoil your customer, right? You really want to, like it's a first date. You know how you bake for a first date and you're like, oh, I'll get the lobster and I'll get the steak and I'll make sure that I, that kind of, and it's hard if you're crunching numbers, right? But if you're a little bit absurd about it, I don't know what the loaf would be, might be in somebody that doesn't exist, like a hypothetical baker that might be listening. But let's say his most expensive loaf might be $13. Is that a fair hype number, or is it lower or higher? I'm not even sure, right? Maybe $9.
Yeah, I think the $10 to $15 is becoming a new norm in artisan bread.
Good. So double that, right? And the cost of goods might be $5 more, and then the labor will be a little more intensive, right? But you're not going to lose money on it. You're going to make more money on it and see what happens. See how that loaf sells out, right? Make 50 of them or whatever small amount is for this bakery, right? 10 if it's a small, or 100 if it's big, whatever. But I think those loaves will be the most coveted and celebrated and will bring people in for your quote unquote regular products as well, right? And as the robots come, you will see that you will be shifting more and more into those products, but you don't have to make the shift drastically and all at once now, is my encouragement and invitation, basically. But it's really not about look at me and how creative I am, and more about let's all be creative. And it has been a communal journey, right? I've been writing and posting about this for like 5 years now. And if you look on Instagram, there's many teachers and many students and participants, and the knowledge is growing exponentially. I'm not the only one harvesting and sharing knowledge. I'm also relying on other people's right? Like the hive brain. Mm-hmm. It's a communal journey that once you're in that mind frame, then everybody is inspired by and quote unquote copies, and then one up the other person. And
kind of push each other to new heights.
You have to, if there was only one snowboarder, then there wouldn't be whatever his name is, the cool best one, right?
Shaun White.
Shaun White. There wouldn't be a Shaun White if he was alone, right? He wouldn't be a so.
But Guy, how far have you personally pushed the envelope? Because we did talk about this way at the beginning. Is how much can you expand the envelope of creativity? Like what's one of the most expensive or valuable, let's say, in terms of the amount of effort that went into it, loaves that you've made? Tell a couple stories like that.
Sure. So the one that is really like the quote unquote the record one is not one that I'm super proud of, because it's not a good example of my of what I'm trying to teach, right? The price, and it was 720, or I can't remember the exact number, for a kilo. Yeah, it was funny. It was good. The purpose of it, they wanted the most expensive bread in the world, right? And so there was a gram, which represented or came in the form of 8 jars of gold flakes, right? A gram of gold, and you can look up the price of gold, and a gram of silver, right? That I put into, and I was giddy as I was doing it. You can see it online somewhere. It was shot for television. Because I've never touched so much, it's only a gram, but it feels like piles and piles that you're pushing into the dough. And there's an ancient tradition of consuming gold, goes back to Rome and to ancient Egypt before that. Some people say that there's some medicinal qualities to it, but really it passes through you undigested. And I guess rich people get a kick of having gold in their poop or something, looking down and seeing gold flakes. I don't know. But sure, I was like, I guess it should be me that makes this bread. But what I'd rather focus on for example, is truffles, right? So why is it okay to shave $50 or sometimes $100 worth of truffles onto a plate of spaghetti, usually plain white spaghetti, right?
Right.
But it's not okay to shave them into a loaf of bread, right? So just there in the cost of good is like $100 worth of truffle. And of course, you have to make sure that everything surrounding those truffles is up to par, right? With the grains and the milling and the natural fermentation, everything has to be a cohesive story of paying attention to old and new and seasonal, and it's like traditions, right? So when I work with the purple corn, I blink towards South America, and I know that this corn comes traditionally from Peru, and so I look into that, right? And what else? Maybe if I want to go a little broader, then I'll use chia, maybe not directly related to this purple corn, but communicates in that land. Sometimes I'll want to be like the hybrid cuisines, and draw on different cultures and make quote unquote hybrids, right? That celebrate like a Pan-Pacific loaf, California, Japan, or something like that, and call it Pan-Pacific.
Yeah. But you mentioned truffles. Have you made a loaf where you put, a ton of truffle into a loaf? Have you done one of those?
I've made a loaf with a bunch of different, very expensive ingredients. Even when it comes, so yes, the answer is yes. But more than that, when I say soak in whiskey, so you can soak in a $20 whiskey, and you can soak in a $100 whiskey, right? And put that on your label and ingredients. And so it can become extremely as expensive as you, but it doesn't have to be, right? Because if you soak even in mediocre, decent whiskey for a month, your rye grains, and then you either strain and add them, or you flambe like I do and add them, or even if you dehydrate and mill them, you'll be shocked. Or ouzo, like the anise flavor of ouzo, or arak, that goes directly into the heart of the grain and stays there, right? And so when you bite into it, you get it almost like sometimes you find alcohol in chocolate, but it's much nicer in bread than it isn't, in my opinion, than it is in chocolate.
But how do you find clients, or how do clients find you to commission these breads? Because obviously, if a hobbyist is not going to want to put all that work into something and not be able to reap some kind of financial reward for it.
So look, my journey, as you know, has been evolving and changing. I started in my wife's kitchen, ruining a few of her ovens, and then I moved to the garage for a few years with her little Rothko. And now I'm at this giant facility, and there's like 24 employees, and we're still growing, right? So I think that this can be practiced on any scale. And when it comes to clients, I don't know how people go and find clients. For me, it was, I turned clients away, right? For me, the way I found clients is by saying no to everybody and kind of building a bit of a cult. Because it wasn't my business, it was a hobby. So if you're a hobbyist, be a hobbyist, right? And the way people invest in really fancy fly fishing baits or whatever they're called, I don't know, the hooks.
Yeah, those flies, yeah.
Yeah, if it's your hobby, there's no limit. You buy, you love baking, then you'll buy the Challenger bread pan, right? Because it's good and because you love baking, not because there's financial utility to it for you, and there'll be a return on investment. It's the same as like making dinner for your friends. Like, do you want to make the cheapest dinner for your friends when you cook for them, or do you want to spoil them? So
right.
The hobbyist is not really the issue, I don't think, but more the commercial bakers, right? And how do you adapt it on a larger scale? And when you have schedule and the product needs consistency, and these are all valid questions.
Yeah. And find a market for it, that of people that are
not
price sensitive and are willing to pay for that creativity.
Look, today, as opposed to 4 or 5 years ago, there is a call in the market, right, to replace white sugars or to reduce or eliminate additives, and they want whole grain. This guy that makes pita said to me, sweetheart, he goes, what does it mean whole grain? He's an Israeli Palestinian guy, and he didn't understand what they mean by the word whole grains, right? But the fact is that people are asking for it now, right? And soon they're going to ask for naturally fermented, and soon they'll ask for what functional ingredients do you have, right? That actually makes this bread healthier. So there's a notion in America that bread is shit for you. Pardon my French, right? That it's the bread that needs to be cut out of the diet. Gluten is bad for you. Bread is bad for you. Wheat is bad. The answer is no. Bad wheat is bad for you. Bad gluten is bad for you. Sure. Additives might be bad for you. Sorry, Paratus, I don't know, maybe. But there's better versions for all of these things, right? And I think that when you make a healthy, delicious, and beautiful product, the market will appear.
Well, let's come. Sungyu Lee asks, first, great breads, super inspirational. I'm wondering what made you start this journey for bread creativity, and please introduce one bread with the Chinese medicine. Thank you. But I think you've made breads with Chinese medicinal ingredients, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm going to look up the post so I don't misquote, because I collaborated with a beautiful Chinese medicine person that came to visit me recently, and she might start selling them, a blend that she made that was right for spring. I think she came during spring, and she said, this is a great spring blend. I don't want to misquote, and I don't want to say blah blah, because it was very important things she said. And then I milled that. So let me see if I can find the list of those ingredients.
But we did see in the photos, that spread of ingredients of medicinal.
Yeah. Most of these are Chinese influenced ingredients. Like, for example, my tangerine peel, right? So tangerine peel, and I've been aging it for a couple of years now. I've been making it myself. Is a very well-used Chinese ingredient. All of these mushrooms, and I can't remember their name by heart, but if I had you guys on the phone, I would take you to the pantry and you can see. Wood ear, I can't remember their names off my heart, right? They're just on and then there's like this pink oyster. All of these are not just beautiful umami flavors, most of them, some are a bit bitter, but they have medicinal values, right? And then the barks of trees and of roots, the roots themselves, there's black. If you look at the very bottom right corner, that's black garlic, right? It took me 3 weeks to make a giant batch of black garlics, but that's the most delicious ingredient, one of the most delicious ingredients I've ever tasted, but extremely medicinal, strong properties.
With the last couple minutes that we have, let me throw these last few questions at you. First of all, Runner asks, is the amount of salt adjusted to offset all the additional flavors?
Wonderful question. So yes, some things like I use a lot of seaweed and kelp, and what's the other one? Like the chlorinella, what's it called? Like the little, I forget, the thing that I grow in an aquarium, like the little thing that floats, the algae. What do we call it? So all of these, and I even have this plant that grows by the ocean that comes in salty. Anyway, I use low salt, usually around 1.5 to 1.8, not more than that. But yes, if things need less, I jump on it. And if things come with a bit of salt or something that can complement less salt, then by all means, yes.
Okay, and then another couple questions. With the addition of medicinal herbs, do you lose any potency with the heating of the dough?
That's a great question. So I do the research into it. And when you think about Chinese medicine, and so the answer is it depends, of course. Something like, for example, vitamin C, I can shove in as much vitamin C as I want into the bread, but the heat will break it down and it you won't get it from the bread. But when it comes to Chinese medicine, most of these ingredients are meant to be brewed in heat. And when you think about the internal temperature of bread, because we think about the ovens, they're extremely hot, but internally, it just below boiling, right? So it's very similar to the brewing temperature in Chinese medicine. So actually, many of them rely on the heat in order to activate. But I do look into it to make sure that I'm not being an idiot about it and putting things that then get canceled. Yeah, it's a great question.
So before we lose the black garlic thread, somebody wants to know, can you say more about how you use the black garlic?
Well, if you know black garlic, one of my favorite treats is just to eat one of them, right? It's sweet and delicious. It's nothing like garlic. It's not even really reminiscent of garlic, but I will usually mash it into the pre-ferment. I didn't talk about, I skimmed over the pre-ferments and I just said natural fermentation. Believe me, it works. But one thing I will add quickly about pre-ferments is that I think of them as magnifying glasses of flavor. And even of nutrition. So, because we know that fermentation changes, the health of things, right? Like sauerkraut is healthier than cabbage, for example.
Right.
So if I mill something, I'll put it in the pre-ferment. If I have something medicinal or something that I really want to feature the flavor, I will put it in the pre-ferment. And it just pushes it out a little further in the final product than if I would have added it later on in the process. So that's what I do. I usually just make it disappear. And a lot of these things for me are not about a punch of flavor. So sometimes people use like brewer's malt, but usually those breads are extremely malty, almost, bitter sometimes. I like flavors that you need to guess and you go, what's happening right now? What is hitting me? And the answer is often not, the question is often not answered.
Yeah. And it really is such a new sort of venture, so to speak, and an adventure that it's an exploration that continues to unfold. And I want to just go back to you mentioned about using dried peels and things like that. And your key ingredient there is your dehydrator. To use a small plug-in dehydrator?
Yeah, Excalibur, not a sponsor, but really superior product. For years, I've had a bunch of other smaller ones. You can buy the small round ones if you're at home until you need more space, more shelves. But it's amazing. One of my favorite new things that I haven't started incorporating yet, I've just been piling up on, is because I gift farmers at the farmers market. I have a bunch of farmer friends and I bake for them and they shower me with their produce. So I end up with a lot of tangerines during the season.
Perfect. Well, I know that there's a lot more questions coming in, and I think what we'll do is we'll carry this over into our less formal presentation in the after party in the VIP lounge, and we'll invite all of you who can join us to join us there. Those of you who are watching on the archives and can't do that, sorry that you'll miss the after party, but we'd love to have you come to the after party. So continue to keep returning to these presentations and join us for those. And if you need a VIP pass upgrade, just write to the symposium. I think it's breadsymposium.com and find out how to do that. But Guy, this has really been, as I said earlier, inspirational. A lot of the comments are saying the same thing. I think it's kind of getting people to think out of the box and think in a new way about the realm of possibility. And so let's continue the conversation over in the VIP lounge. And definitely one person wants you to amplify more about what percentage of black garlic you use in a bread. And, there's lots of, we'll get down to the nitty gritty in our conversation. So what you and I will do, guys, we'll log out of this webinar and we'll log back in on the other link that gets us back into the VIP lounge. And everybody else who's watching knows how to do this. You just navigate over to the VIP lounge and we'll meet you over there in a few minutes. And I want to just thank all of you who are watching, who are not going to be able to join us, for being part of this and experiencing this. And, keep coming back. We've got lots more. We've got 2 more months of presentations in the symposium. This is like the journey also that never seems to end. And Guy, once again, thank you for this. And we'll continue the conversation in 2 or 3 minutes in the lounge. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for coming.
And then remember, Wednesday, you come on back Wednesday for an actual demonstration of some of those shaping and stenciling techniques. So thank you for doing that as well. Okay, we'll see you all soon. Thank you to our team behind the scenes. Our event, technical and production partners, Ganoid Communications, including our producer, Gurmit Singh, and his team, Jita Gajaria, Gagandeep Singh, and Jaydev Kashari. Thanks also to Ted Nelson and Lael Fretzel of our creative and marketing team at Gumbo Marketing, and the many folks at Johnson & Wales University who supported me throughout this event. My executive assistant, Sarah Standifer, communications director, Melinda Law, Chancellor Mim Rooney, Charlotte Campus President Cheryl Richards, and our executive team leaders, deans and faculty, Maureen Dumas, Michael Schrader, Michelle Nicholas, Mark Norman, Brent Steyerwalt, Laurie Heimbach, Jerry Lanuza, Amy Felder, Harry Paymiller, Richard Miskovich, and many, many others. Thank you all.